proceeding with the moment of silence followed by the serenity prayer. The serenity prayer.
God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
My name is Josh Turner, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is June 3rd, 2016, and I'm a member of this group that came to Bloomington. This is our GSO closed meeting, or open meeting statement. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. In keeping with our singleness of purpose and our third tradition, which states that the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking, we ask that all who participate confine their discussions to their problems with alcohol. This is the AA preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, and neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And I have asked two home group members to help me open. I've asked Frank to read how it works, and Carol's going to read the traditions.
Good evening, my name is Frank, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 15, 2015. How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually, men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2. Came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4. Made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5. Admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8. Made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if He were sought.
Hello, I'm Carol Group and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February 8th, 2020 and Came to Believe is my home group. The AA traditions. To those now in its fold, Alcoholics Anonymous has made the difference between misery and sobriety and often the difference between life and death. AA can, of course, mean just as much to uncounted alcoholics not yet reached. Therefore, no society of men and women ever had a more urgent need for continuous effectiveness and permanent unity. We alcoholics see that we must work together and hang together, else most of us will finally die alone. The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous are, we AAs believe, the best answers to our experience has yet given to those ever-urgent questions. How can AA be best function, and how can AA best stay whole and so survive? The 12 traditions of Alcoholics Anonymous. 1. Our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2. For our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as He may express Himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3. The only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4. Each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5. Each group has but one primary purpose, to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6. An AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. 7. Every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8. Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9. AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10. Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11. Our public relations policy is based on attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12. Anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
Thank you, Frank and Carol. Let's see. Next, we have our meeting schedule. We are one group that meets twice a week. We meet on Tuesdays and Fridays from 7 to 8. On the first 3 Tuesdays of the month is a big book study. On the 4th Tuesday, we study a tradition that corresponds with that month. And when there's a 5th Tuesday, we study AA history. On Friday nights, we have a closed discussion using AA-approved literature, with the exception of the last Friday, which is our speaker meeting. And closed meetings are for alcoholics or anyone having the desire to stop drinking, and open meetings are for anyone desiring to attend. This is an open meeting, and we're glad you're all here. So we do have a good speaker tonight. I'm going to ask Paige to come up and introduce him, because I think he's also going to give us a little bit of history. So I'm going to turn it over to Paige.
Thank you, Josh. Good evening. My name is Paige Wood, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is March the 31st, 1989, and I'm a member of this group, the Came to Believe group of Rocky Mount. I'm terrifically excited to hear our speaker tonight. Jim has come all the way. He's brought a good friend with him, Bill Tillis, and a couple of good friends of them here visiting also, and all of you. But I want to take just a moment of their time and celebrate a couple of important events that you may or not be completely aware of. June the 1st 87 years ago, 1935, our co-founder, Dr. Bob, took his last drink early in the morning. Bill Wilson gave him a couple of beers to steady his hand, and he went off and performed an operation. Didn't come back home till late that night, had left that operation, left the hospital, and went out and started making amends, something he said he would not do. And that was the turning point for his sobriety and the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we celebrate June the 10th, as the anniversary of AA. Well, another important date, every one of us has a sobriety date, and that's very important to each one of us individually. And this home group has a date as well. June the 1st, 1999, this group started meeting in this church, St. Paul United Methodist, and there's 3 people here tonight that was at that first meeting 23 years ago. Sandy Lampert, Larry Jordan, and myself. And so we gathered together months and months before that and planned this group. This group did not start with a resentment and a coffee pot. It was almost a couple of years in the making before we kind of came over here and got started. And when we got set up, we had everything. We were a registered group. We had a name. We had our literature, and the church had made a deal with us that they would treat us as an equal part of the church, and they have. We've never missed a meeting since we started 23 years ago. Rain, snow, sleet, anything, including the pandemic. We've never been shut down. We've always had a meeting. Even when the pandemic came, we got into the Zoom technology, and we got it still going today. And so, in fact, we got people on board tonight through Zoom. So I'm glad of that. I wish they were here in person. Well, let me tell you a little bit about that first meeting, and then I'll get right into what we're here about. I told you that 3 of us, Sandy, Larry, and myself, were here. We had 14 people show up that night. Chuck Kraft, Sandy Lampert, Larry Jordan, myself, Bob Tate, who has passed on to the big meetings in the sky, Peter Wilkins, Amy Jones. Now you know her as Amy Miller, and her husband at the time, Adrian Jones, James Borkin, who has also passed on sober to the big meeting in the sky, Mike Gunther, and Jay Joyner. And so, to the best of my knowledge, every one of those people are still sober. Everybody's keeping their own dates now. Keep that in mind. Listen to this. This is interesting to me. AA doesn't keep records, but we got a record of our first meeting, and we always talk about it once a year. 14 people here. We had a 7th tradition, and we collected. This was awesome. $14.11. and we were grandiose like Bill Wilson was. We said, well, we're going to pay this church $100 a month back then for the use of the facility. And we said, $14.11. Multiply that by how many meetings to get to that $100. You know, we were worried. But God prevailed, and He provided, so we're still here. So anyway, that first meeting, Sandy read How It Works. The traditions were read by Larry Joyner. The chips, we gave out little plastic medallions back there 23 years ago for links of sobriety. We don't do that anymore. And Chuck did that. And Bob Tate read page 100. So we started out under the authority of page 100. We're in tonight under that same authority. So I'm very grateful that our home group has matured to where it is. We've helped plant 2 or 3 other meetings during that time with our membership going forward and carrying that 3 legacy idea that we came here with. We left the 3 legacy group out of Wilson, North Carolina. So anyway, without AA, I'm sure that many of us would not be alive today. I know I would not. And so we celebrate AA being 87 years old and our home group being 23 years old. Kevin reminded me that we started out with one meeting, and that was on Tuesday night. He came in shortly after we opened up and everything, and he said, lo and behold, he wasn't here long, and we added a meeting, and said, and they're going to expect me to come 2 nights a week. And so he's still showing up 2 nights a week. So we added that meeting 2 years after we started. Anyway, that's a little history of Came to Believe. The exciting part about tonight is that this is a speaker meeting, and the speaker is no stranger to many of you, certainly not to us, and to the men that are with him. He's a steward of AA. He's a real resource of how this thing works, and been here a long time, and is still carrying that torch, still carrying that message to the alcoholic still suffering and that needs help. And so I think the world of this man and his sobriety, and I'd like you to help me welcome Jim Fairclough.
This is my water bottle. If I drink all that, we might have to take a break. Before we get started, one little story about a big bottle of water or booze. A long time ago, we got calls from people during the day and night, and I'm in trouble and I'm in a certain place, and we'd make the 12-step call on them. Now, I had a grocery store in downtown Raleigh, and I was kind of free, able to take some of those calls. But this one was a woman, and she called one of our friends, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Her name was Gertrude. And Gertrude said, Jimmy boy, I've got a drunk woman and I can't find another woman. Will you come over and help me? And she's in bad shape. And I thought, sure will, Gertrude. And I went over there, got the address. And this woman was in bad shape. She needed to be in the hospital. She had fallen, she had cut herself, and she was drunk, and she was defiant. And she won't gonna go anywhere, to the hospital and all. And we talked to her, and finally she said, if you'll get me something to drink, I might go. And Gertrude said, well, I'm sorry, we don't have anything. And she said, honey, you go in my bedroom, look in the second drawer in my chest of drawers, and behind my undies, pull them back, and you'll find the bottle. And Gertrude went in there and got that bottle and brought it back with a tea glass that she had gotten out of the kitchen. Now, Gertrude thought this was wine, about 6 or 7% alcohol by volume, but it was rum. And as she poured that rum in that glass, and it got fuller and fuller, I could see that woman's eyes get bigger and bigger. As she turned that thing up, and when she got through drinking, she would go anywhere with us if it was in a wheelbarrow. I thought about that when I saw that bottle of water that they bought. My name's Jim Fairclough, and I'm alcoholic. And my sobriety date's November 13th, 1975, and I'm grateful for you people for allowing me to be sober. And I'm grateful for the Came to Believe group to invite me here to share my experience, strength, and hope with you. It's really a great privilege. And I might be wrong, but I understand that my sponsor did this for a lot of years, and he's unable to do it. And this man's been my sponsor for over 43 years. So I'm standing up here tonight, maybe as a substitute for him. His name is Dave C., a great man in Alcoholics Anonymous, and a person that has helped me so much in this program. Again, I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful for people that drove with me, and all of you for being here. And I'm grateful that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that I have sobriety. And there's a lot of people in my life grateful for that too. Now, the story's been told, or the word has gotten around sometime, that Jim Fairclough is not a speaker, he's a storyteller, you know. And, you know, I think about that, and it's the truth. That's what I am. I'm a storyteller, but all of us are. That's what we do. That's how this thing got started. Thank you, Paige, for bringing that up about Dr. Bob and Bill. You know, Eddie in 1934 took his story to Bill. Bill got sober later, and in 1935 carried his story to Dr. Bob. And Dr. Bob and Bill took their story to Bill D, AA number 3, and Alcoholics Anonymous was off and running. And we owe a great deal of gratitude for these early members of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm going to start my story tonight by telling you a story. And this is a true story. And it has nothing to do with my sobriety. Maybe I'm going to deviate a little bit from my regular story, but as I think about this story, maybe it has everything to do with my sobriety or my story. And isn't it funny that how things happen in life and we pick up on them? And I'm going to start this story by saying this: before COVID. This story started before COVID. And I was looking at social media, Facebook, and my neighbor is a kindergarten teacher in the local elementary school. And she's had a story or post on Facebook. And it caught my interest, and I watched it. And she told the story about at Easter time in that little elementary school in Kenansville that they would have an Easter egg hunt. And the teachers would buy these plastic Easter eggs that would pop apart, you know, and you could put them back together. And they would take them home with them, and they would put little treats or trinkets or something of interest to those young children. And the next day, they'd come back to school, the teacher would hide the Easter eggs, and the children would go out there and find the Easter eggs, and they'd come back in the room, and they just had exciting time opening up and seeing what was on the inside of their eggs. But that year, they decided they would do it different, as she told the story. And what they did, rather than the teachers taking the plastic eggs home, they gave each child in that school a plastic Easter egg. Told them to go home and find something in their house that was special to them and meant a lot to them. Nothing with any monetary value, just something in the house that was really, really special to them. And they did, and the kids brought the eggs back. They hid them, they gathered the eggs, and they came back in the school building to open the eggs. Now, on that post on Facebook, they showed 2 of the eggs. And they opened the first one, and it was full of rocks, little pebbles. And a little boy in the back of the room, his name must have been Johnny, stuck up his hand. Oh, that's my Easter egg. I just love rocks. I like to, wherever I go, I like to find special rocks. And they are so special to me. And folks, this is the way I saw it. And this is a true story. They opened the second egg, and there was a white AA desire chip in it. Now, what I'm telling you up to that point is true. Anything else, and I'm going to talk about it a little more, conjecture on my part. Those teachers had no idea of the significance of that white desire chip in that Easter egg. But I thought about it. Sure, it was special to that child. Something happened in that house that he couldn't explain. But Mama and Daddy weren't fussing anymore. Things were quieter. There was serenity in the house. There was ease and comfort. And that child might have not known the reason why, but that white AA Desire chip had something to do with it. Maybe that's my story. Maybe that's my story. I just love that story, and I'm going to tell it as long as people let me do it, you know. So my story starts back in eastern North Carolina on a tobacco farm. Grew up in a large rural family and a large church-going, non-drinking family. That's what I grew up in. And it was a good place to grow up. We were taught good values to live by and given principles to live by. And we worked hard, and it was a good family, and there was not a lot of problems in the family, as I recall, growing up. And maybe that was because of the absence of alcohol in the house. But if we'd been good boys and girls, brothers and sisters, we got a chance on Saturday afternoon to go to town. Now, town was not a great big place, but it had things that were necessary and for people. They had a post office, a grocery store, a hardware store, a feed store, a little dress shop. The great thing about that little town was, and most little towns had them, was the Alice Theater. Now, if we'd been good, and we got our chores good, we went to town. Adults went off and did the things they needed to do, and they'd herd us up and take us to the Alice Theater. Now, you'd go into Alice Theater, and it was about the greatest thing in my life, you know, when I was 7 or 8 or 9 years old. And you could take a quarter, and that's what they gave us. And you could go in Alice Theater, get your ticket to go in, a bag of popcorn, and a 12-ounce Pepsi Cola in a bottle, you know. And you could go in there and stay all afternoon. A lot of times they had double features, and they were always cowboy movies, you know, Western movies. And they had a newsreel, and maybe a couple of cartoons, and I had a cereal. So we was occupied all afternoon in there. And then when the show was over, the movie was over, the adults came by and herded us up again to take us home. Now, my grandmama, and I have to describe her as the best Southern Baptist that ever lived, and I really believe that with all my heart. And she had a lot of intuitive thoughts. And she looked at me, I was the oldest boy, and I'm about 8 years old, and she grabbed me by the ear and pulled me over to the side. Now, she pulled me by the ear to get my attention. And she came over, she pulled me over and said, Jimmy boy, I want to show you something. And she said, I want you to look there. And there was the town drunk. His name was Charlie. Every little town had a town drunk when I was growing up. And the town drunk, you know, you think you'd get drunk and stay home. No, we know better than that. What do? You get drunk and you want to go somewhere. And where do you go in Salemburg? You go downtown Salemburg so everybody can see you in your glory, you know. And maybe he's laying over in the outside the building, passed out, or in a parking lot or something, you know, but that was Charlie. And she would point him out to me, and my brothers and sisters said she never did that to them, you know. But she pointed out, she said, Jimmy boy, I want you to look. And I'd look at Charlie, and all of his was splendor, and she said he was a good man. He came from a good family. He had a good family, had a good job. Yeah, but look at him now. Now, in the town I grew up in, and the people I grew up with, booze was described this way. It was either liquor or devil's brew. Well, either one, you know. It was never called anything bourbon or whiskey. It was liquor or devil's brew. And she said, look at him now after that devil's brew got hold of him. He's a sorry, wasted, defeated man. And when he dies, he'll go straight to hell. And a cold chill ran down my back, and it's almost doing it right now, you know, just thinking about it. And so the fear of what alcohol would do to me kept me away from the drink until I was 15 years old. And I'll take just a minute or two to tell you about that drink. My best buddy Jeffrey and I had got permission from my parents to go down to a local hangout and try to catch a ride over to a neighboring town to a high school basketball game on a Friday night. And two boys came up. They were driving a 1954. It had mud flaps on it, and it had fender skirts. It had fuzzy dice hanging from the rearview mirror, a squirrel tail on the radio area, the radio full volume, playing that good rock and roll music at 50. And they pulled up and looked at us and said, "You guys want to go to the ball game?" Well, we sure did, you know, and Jeffrey and I jumped in the back of that 54 and we went over to the next town to see a basketball game. And it was fun. It was good. I'm with two older boys. And they were popular. They were cool. They were cats. And they act like cats. And people were noticing them. And of course they noticed me because I was right there with them. I wouldn't let them get out of sight, you know, hook my finger in that belt loop, you know, and hang up on them. And because there was girls there. And the girls were looking at the older boys, and maybe they'll catch a glance at me. And I'd say something to my buddy Jeffrey, "Look at that little girl over there, she's pretty." You know, and he said, "Go over there and talk to her." And I can't do that, you know. And at 15 years old, you got a lot of things that you just can't do, you know, without a drink or two in you. And so we had a good time. We got back in that car, and those boys brought out a bottle of whiskey, or jar of whiskey. Now, to this day, I can't remember whether it was White Lightning or homemade wine. But whatever it was, it did the trick, you know. And those two boys took a drink, older boys, took a drink out of that jug, and they turned around and looked in the back seat, and they said, "You boys want a drink?" And my best buddy for life, Jeffrey, said, "I sure do." And he grabbed that jug, turned it up, took a big drink out of it. Before he ever chased it, he took the back of his hands, wiped his mouth. He said, "It's the best I ever drunk." And I knew he was lying. He had never taken a drink in his life. He had told me. Now, I'm sitting in the other corner of the back seat, and you know how it is. All the eyes in that car were focused on me. And I think they were thinking, this is what I was thinking, they were thinking, what's he going to do? And I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about the warning my grandmama gave me. You know, I don't want to go to hell. You know, that Baptist preacher told me what hell was, and I don't believe I want to go there. And I had another thought. Told you we were taught good principles to live by. I didn't want to violate the trust my parents had put in me. You know, I probably told them something. I'd be a good boy and I won't do anything that you'll be ashamed of, and I'll come home at a decent time. Then I had another thought. What if I don't take that drink? What's going to happen? It'll be all over school the next day. You know, Jeffrey was man enough to take a drink and Jimmy won't, you know. And I couldn't live with that. And I said, "Give me that jug," and I took a drink out of it. And people, it changed my life. It changed my life almost instantly. It changed my life that night. Still changing it today, maybe in a different and better way. I don't know how much I drank that night, but I drank enough that I got sick. Well, first of all, I got happy. I got silly. I got sick. I threw up. I passed out. And I got in trouble. Now, you can... For the next 20 years, that was about my drinking story. You know, I got in trouble a lot when I was drinking. I knew from that night when that stuff started working in me, and I caught that first little buzz, that this is something I want to do, you know, and I'm going to do it again the very next moment. A lot of stories in there between. But in high school, I drank like that. I was able to graduate. I did get in a little trouble. I was able to get out of it with some help from understanding people. Namely, my mama was on the school board, you know, and they kept me in school. And then I got the opportunity, and a few people in my school, high schools, got the opportunity to go off to college. And for the next period of time, I went to college, and I wasted my mama's and daddy's hard-earned money. I was not a good student. You know, I looked around college, and I couldn't find anything that I was good at. You know, some people are good at history and language and math and chemistry and stuff. I just couldn't find anything I was good at except partying and drinking, and I excelled in that. And it was not long before I was leaving school, and the only good thing for me really that came out of that experience in college was that I asked my sweetheart at the time if she would marry me. And we got married right after leaving school. Now that girl, this past May the 20th, and I celebrated 61 years of continuous marriage. Most people didn't think it was going to work. Now, I don't take any credit for that. My wife was married the whole 61 years. I had a few lapses in there, but we came through. And I thank my God for this. I think that when I wanted to do something about my drinking, that I had a sober family to get sober. A lot of people don't have that advantage. I went home, and my family really supported me. We have a lot of stories, and I can tell a lot of stories of the devastation on people, places, and things that alcoholic drinking or my alcoholic drinking caused. There's a lot in there. I can sit down, we'll talk about it after the meeting if you want to, about the brushes with the law and the things that I did, the ugliness of the disease of alcoholism. But I think the real devastation that alcoholism for me was what it did to my family. I went in and it was ugly, some of it. I was not a physical drunk. I didn't go home and beat them up, but I did verbally. And I did it for not being there when I should be there. The many times that my wife needed me to be there, a child was sick and needed to go to the doctor, or a child was hurt and needed to go to the hospital, the emergency room, and Daddy was not home. He was out somewhere drinking or he was drunk. And all these things take a toll on the family. I understand that. And I think that's the real disease of alcoholism. I'm getting old and I forget words, so y'all excuse me on there. Just if I don't get one right, you just add it in yourself, isn't it? Now I tell this story, and maybe it's kind of a signature story for me. I ran a grocery store. I left that little town after a while. My wife and I, we went to Raleigh, and I opened up a business up there. It was a neighborhood grocery store, an IGA store. And I ran that store for a lot of years. 4 years of it, I ran it drunk. And then the rest of the years, thank God, I ran it sober. A lot of things, a lot of stories came out of that story. The drunkenness episode that happened there, and the things that I did. And even after I got sober, there was a lot of good things that happened. I got a chance to share my story with a lot of people, street people and stuff that would wander through there. I know that the business people in the part of the town I was in came to me and said, "Jim, you're going to need to take something and get that white cross off the side of your building." This is after I got sober. And it was just a little cross, and it's white. I didn't even know it was out there. I said, "Why?" They said, "Well, that means that you're an easy pick, the street people will know to go in your store, that you won't run them out. And you will treat them with dignity. So, you're an easy mark. And I said, hell no, we're not going to take it off. You want us to put another one on? And I did get the chance to share our experience, strength, and hope with a lot of people because of the location of that story. But when I was drinking, one of the things that I did after we closed up the store, and I don't know if you felt like this or not, but I felt like the whole world was against me. Everything was, I never was dealt a fair hand. I shouldn't, with my ability, I shouldn't be in that little neighborhood store. I should be out in the shopping center and the big supermarket. That's where I should be. And I always wanted more, better, and different. And I would go down after closing up the store at night, and I'd get in the basement. That store had a full basement in it. And then we used it as a stock room. And I'd sit down there and I'd cut the lights down real dim. And I'd sit down there with my bottle. I'd been drinking all day long, maintenance drinking, but I'd sit down with that bottle and I would think about how life had mistreated me. Poor me. And I'd sit there and I'd drink out of that bottle and sometimes just sit down there and cry. That thing won't right, On one Saturday night, I was down there doing that, and I just felt like I needed a drinking companion. In downtown Raleigh on a Saturday night, after 12 o'clock, you open up the back door of the grocery store and the first guy walks by, he said, "Buddy, you want a drink?" He said, "You got one?" I said, "I got a whole store full of them." Come on in. We went in. What do you want to drink? I got whiskey, I got wine, I got beer, and his eyes just lit up. He was down there looking for a drink. And we sat down there, and he was the perfect drinking partner. I could tell him about my wife. I could tell him about business people that I had to deal with. I could tell him about all the bad things in my life and the unfairness that people were, the way they were treating me. And he agreed with everything I said as long as the liquor lasted, So we were sitting down there, I don't know, well after midnight, and he said, "Isn't there something else we can do?" And I said, "Well, have you ever shot a 38? He said, 38, what's a 38? I said, it's a pistol. You put bullets in it, you pull the trigger, and it shoots things out. He said, you got one? I said, up in the office, got a whole box of bullets. He said, go get them. Now, we're drunk, and I've never seen this guy before in my life. He was a total stranger. I go upstairs in my drunkenness and get a 38 revolver and a box of bullets. Went down there and got a bale of grocery bags, took a magic marker and put a bullseye on it and put it in the back of the stock room in there. And we started shooting. Both of us were drunk. We missed a lot, and there were brick columns down there, and brick dust was flying, there was ketchup spattered on the wall, there was vinegar wall, it was a mess. Next day when my employees came in, they wanted to know what in the hell had gone on down there, and I don't know where we ever hit the bullseye or not, But sometime during that fracas, I went to sleep. I just passed out, And I wake up sometime later, and I'm looking around, and I can remember, and some of the things, I can remember that gun. I looked there, and the gun was laying on the floor, and there was spent shells laying around. There was the mess that was in that back room, and I couldn't find him. Damn, you think I killed him? That was the first thing. I was sobering up real quick. I went running and looking around. I never did find him. And I know today that he just got scared or tired and went out the back door and left. I don't think he ever took anything. The inventory turned out all right, and God again looks after fools and drunks, I guess. I didn't see that guy for many years. And I got sold in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the things they told me to get busy, and one of the things that I did was that I took meetings into Central Prison in Raleigh, North Carolina. In the Triangle Group, 21 men in that meeting. And first night I went in there, I didn't know what to do. That's the beautiful thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't have to know what a GSR does. Just be a GSR. You'll find out. They'll give you pamphlets to read, and they'll tell you to go places. And I didn't know what to do in prison. But I went in there and I asked those inmates what they wanted to do, and they said, we want to study the steps. Isn't that something? And we started on step 1. And I have to tell you today, some of the best men that I've ever dealt with were those 21 men in Central Prison in North Carolina, State Penitentiary. One night, and they wouldn't let the 21 people be in there, and there was a waiting list to get into the meeting. The guards came up, and they had this guy, and he was shackled. They took the cuffs off from him and told him to go in and have a seat. Now, somebody had got shipped out. Very few of them did that, so the new man came in. And I'm leading the meeting. And the whole time I'm leading that meeting, I'm looking at him. I think I know him. But where do I know him from? So after the meeting, I went up and talked to him. I said, man, I think I know you. He said, hell, I know you. You're that crazy grocery with 38. Oh, my goodness. And we got to be friends there while I was doing that service work in Central Prison. The real sadness of Alcoholics Anonymous is what we do to our families. And God, we can talk about that. We can talk about our mom and my daddy and my brothers and sisters. All of them just didn't know what to do with me. My wife didn't know what to do. My children were kind of young. I'll tell this one story and I have to get off this and do something else. My youngest daughter was 7 years old. And she was visiting in the neighborhood with one of her school friends. And they did what little 7-year-old girls do. They enjoyed each other's company. They talked and they played dolls or whatever little girls do. And when it got time for her to leave, my 7-year-old daughter looked over at her friend and said, I want you to come to my house and play with me. And the daddy overheard it. And he said to my 7-year-old daughter, honey, my daughter can't go to your house. Your daddy is an alcoholic. God, it even hurts today. I don't know what that did to my daughter, but she's a grown woman now with children and grandchildren of her own, and she still remembers that. So we do have an impact on the people that love us the most. On November 13th, 1975, I'm sitting in an old drunk car outside of my house. Too scared. I was not scared, I was terrified. I couldn't get enough courage to open that door and get out. There were bad things happening in my life. And I tried the best I could to control some of them. And I couldn't do it. It was kind of like picking up water with your fingers. You can't do it, And I'm sitting there and that fear, and I had a lot of things to be fearful about. I was losing the business. My mom and daddy had come down to take my wife and my children out of my life. I owed more money than I thought that I could pay back. And if all that's gone, I'm going to be on the streets. I don't know what I'm going to do. I was hopeless. And one of the reasons I was hopeless, I had been places and done things that a lot of you did, and nothing had, except Alcoholics Anonymous, and nothing had worked in my life. I've been prayed over, I've been lectured to, I've been fussed at, I've been cussed out. All those things, nothing to work. All those promises, honey, I'm not going to do it again. I promise you I won't do it again. And I go back and I pick up that one drink and I'm drunk again. And I had all these fears there in the couldn't even get the courage to get out of that car. It was just a place I felt like a safety, maybe, if there was any place in the world. And then maybe I thought about my grandmother. I don't know what caused me to do this, but I can remember it. There's a lot of things that night I can't remember, but I can remember this. All of a sudden I had a feeling that maybe I'll ask God for some help. Now, something that we do. And I'm sitting there and I just slump over the steering wheel as I remember it. And I said, God, help me. I can't stop and I need somebody to help me do it. I need your help. I didn't know it, but I was taking the first step in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I admitted that I was powerless and I needed some help to do something about that powerlessness. And if you're sincere about it, in this program or in an old car, leaning over a steering wheel, talking to the God that you're not even sure that's listening to you because of your actions, if you're sincere about it, you better hold on to your hat. Something's going to happen, and it's going to happen quick. Ain't that, isn't the greatest thing in the world? What I had to do was the easiest thing in the world. Ask God for help and be willing to accept it. Within just a short period of time, there was a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous at my house. Isn't that a miracle? He said when he drove up, well, let me tell you this. There's so many ways that we get here, and so many things happen, but there was usually somebody out there. And this man saw a drunk and had compassion on him, wanted to help him. So he the simplest thing. He wrote his name and his telephone number on a scrap piece of paper one day and handed it to my wife and said, if Jim ever wants to do anything about his drinking, please call me. And they came out of the car and they got me in the house, my wife and 3 children. They helped me in there. I was unable to walk that far. And they sat me down and I told my wife, she says, that honey, I'll do anything. She said, good, I got a telephone number. And she made that call. And that man had to go to work next day, and it was on November 13th. It was a Thursday night, and it was late. It was well after 12 o'clock, and he had to be at work the next day. He had a responsible job. But this is what saved my life. He got out of that warm bed and left that house. He drove in a November rainstorm across town to talk to a drunk like me. He walked in and he had read that chapter, Working with Others. When he walked in, he had a big book under his arm, 2nd edition. I've got it in my house now. When he died, it was given to me. He walked in with that 2nd edition and the big book, a handful of literature. And one of them was this piece of literature. It was very special to me. He did this first. He went and talked to my wife and my children first. Told them that there was a program for them, and he'd have his wife call the next day. And then he came in and talked to me, and I think I was probably kind of like Dr. Ball. I'll give him a few minutes and I'm gone. You know, he talk all he wants to. I've heard it before. But he came in and he did what we do. He told the story. He sat down and told the story. He told me, his name was Hawk, by the way, he told me the story of a boy that grew up in Duplin County, where I live now, that after a football game took a drink with some older boys, and where that drink carried him in almost to death. And he got sober and from Alcoholics Anonymous, and he'd be willing to come the next day and take me to my mother if I wanted to go. And I sat there and listened to him. When he left, I don't know what I wanted. I didn't know whether I wanted AA, didn't know what it was. I don't know where I wanted sobriety. I don't know what I wanted except one thing, and I knew this without a shadow of doubt. I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be like that man. And he came back as promised and kept me to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I've been coming back ever since. One little story in there that I forgot to tell. When Holt drove up, the stranger drove up to my house in that rainstorm, and the drunk daddy was in there laying on the couch or slumped over in a chair or something. Family sitting around not knowing what to expect. There was a little blonde-headed 11-year-old girl standing under the carport waiting for the stranger to come. And he went in and told me this later. And when he came up, she looked at him and said, "Are you here to help my daddy? He's a sick man." And that little blonde-headed girl that supported me in this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, if I was anywhere close, she wanted to go to meetings with me. She became a member of Al-Anon, and she loved AA better than anybody could ever love it. And she just became my go-to person, my daughter. I could sit down and tell her when things weren't right in my life, when I couldn't get in touch with my sponsor, and sometimes I just wanted to talk to her. We were just good buddies. And I don't know why this happens, and I don't know why. I'm not telling this to make you feel sorry for me. It's not like that. On January the 6th of 2021, I had to say goodbye to that little girl. Can I tell one little religious thing? Yeah. The day before she died, on a Monday morning that Sunday, I was sitting there with her. And of course, hospice had been there. She had ovarian cancer. She lived with 7 years with it, and finally took her life. And she was laying in the bed that day, and it was towards the end, and everybody knew it. We were told about it. And they told us that she was not in any pain. They were giving her enough stuff to keep her from being in any pain. Well, that day she was laying there in that bedroom, and she never moved all day long. She never crossed her legs. She never opened her eyes. The only thing that we could see was that she was breathing, and sometimes it was labored a little bit. So I just sat down, and I was in there, just me and her. And I took my fingers and I put it in her hand. And for the next 30 minutes, I told her how much she meant to me. That how honored I was to have a daughter like her. And I told her I love her. And I talked to her about things that we did when she was growing up and she was small. And all of a sudden, I stopped talking. And I said, "Karen," now my fingers are in her hand. She had never moved. I said, "Karen, have you seen Jesus?" And she squeezed my finger. It gave me hope that she's going to be all right. And I'm going to be all right. And you're going to be all right. Thank God that we have a program, Alcoholics Anonymous, that puts lives back together and families back together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. That was a great story. All right. Here at the Can't Believe Group, we do practice the 7th tradition. how Chip's in this group, but if anyone would like to join AA or this group, you can just let us know just by simply saying so. All right, I'm going to ask Paige, he's going to do our home group anniversaries for the month of June.
Jim, I'm so moved by your story again tonight, and I'm so grateful that you were sober and able to take care of your family and to continue to be a solid member of AA and be here tonight with us. I thank you for the men you have around you that came to help support. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim taught here a few years ago, and I was sitting over there where Bill was sitting, and he was getting ready to end his story, and he said, Paige, have y'all got pamphlet so-and-so? And I said, well, yeah, we got everything in this group. And I didn't know that, and I looked behind me, and that very pamphlet Jim pulled out, my copy of it's over there on the table. I've been carrying that pamphlet with me ever since that night, and I've been closing my story with that ever since. And anyway, it's very special to me. Listen, the miracles of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, we could stay here all night long. Everybody in this home group knows that I'm long-winded, and that I always talk about we ought to vote in a 2-hour meeting so that we can call on everybody. And I've been saying that a long time, and I don't think it's ever going to happen, but they know me, I'm going to keep asking. Anyway, tonight, one of the best parts in the whole wide world in AA is that man that brought you to AA, that man that sat down and told you his story and introduced the new man or the new woman to AA and that new way of life and that miracle. Well, that gets the ball rolling, and the very next best thing is sponsorship, and where you can help a man or a woman, help them through the steps just like you had been helped through the steps and to live a new life. And we do that in our home group. We try to do that with every new man and woman that comes to the group. So I've got a couple of special people here tonight that I've been given the pleasure and the privilege to work with for so many years. The first one is Josh, and I've been working with Josh, I'll let him tell you, a long time, but I want you to know that he is a solid, good member of this group today. He's our alternate GSR. He drives almost an hour one way to get here every Tuesday and Friday that he can. He's a father, got 2 fine children, got a wonderful wife and a home, and every bit of that is the blessings of AA that he's got today. He's like a son to me, and so help me celebrate 6 years with Josh.
Thank you, Paige. I don't know more to add. Just sponsorship, home group, and working the steps. And I've been lucky too to have a good family to support me. So, thank you.
Oh my gosh, the rewards just heaped on you in AA is like unbelievable. The next man that's going to celebrate tonight, in fact, he's a month. Both of these guys are late picking up their medallions for one reason or the other. The next guy had to go to a retirement party last year that they had planned for him on his night to pick up the medallion. And I was also out of the country. We were on a trip to Israel, and so we waited so that we could do this together. So this guy is just a rock solid member of this group in Alcoholics Anonymous. He'll go to any length to help somebody. I want to tell the most precious little story on this guy that could ever be. Just a few weeks ago, he knows what I'm going to say. So a few weeks ago, him and I made a 12-step call. You don't get to do that like we used to years ago. The treatment centers get people that just come in. And anyway, we got called by the family. And he said, the family said, we got a real problem with our brother, and we need help. He's in the hospital. Can you help? Can you do something about it? So he was in Wilson Memorial. Jim's on staff over there. So I said, Jim, we got a 12-step law. He said, well, meet me at my office. We met at his office. And so he got his badge and his white lab coat and everything. He looked like, well, he was. He looked like Mr. DR, you know. So we go walking through that hospital, and all the staff, all the nurses said, hey, I'm dealing, I guess they think I'm an out-of-town consultant. Anyway, we show up and we try to tell our story to this guy and try to help him, and so typical, you know, he's not ready. He thinks AA is great for us, but he's not that bad. And of course, we're walking into a hospital room and he's strapped down, you know. but he's not that bad. Anyway, and the guy said, I know you. And he pointed at Jim around and said, you treated my mom. You were my mom's doctor. And Jim said, straight face, straight up, he said, I hope I was sober. I just love that story. Anyway, help me celebrate 17 big years with Jim Rowder.
My name is Jim Rowder. I am an alcoholic. My sobriety date's the 23rd of May, 2005. And I've been a member of this group for many, many years. I knew Page when I first came into AA back in the mid-90s, and he was my sponsor. But you know how you are, how some of us are anyway. You think you got this thing controlled, and you join, and then the next thing you know, you're out doing something else. But he put up with me from around 1994 to around 2005 when I finally got sober. And he was always and has always been there for me. I was a tough nut. I just could not get my stuff together. I am a physician. I just retired, but I put a lot of people in danger. My family. I did a lot of things when I drank, but God was there. And you were there, and you have brought me this far, and I'm going to continue to come back. This has been a difficult year for my wife and I. My daughter died from overdose in August of last year. So it's not been quite a year yet. But AA's been there for me, and we've had lots of friends that have been there for us. And I have never thought about taking a drink since that happened. I never thought about it before, but since I've been sober. When I walked into a treatment center the last time in 2005, I don't know what happened. I walked through the door, and from then on, I never wanted to take a drink. And that's been a blessing. And I've tried to give back to AA, and I continue, and I will continue to try to do that. But this is a real honor for me to pick up a 17-year chip. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. I think Kevin is going to read the paragraph off of page 100, and then we'll close with the Lord's Prayer.
My name's Kevin Lewis. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is March 17, 2001. And Jim, thank you so much. What a powerful message tonight. I certainly have a lot of identification with that. And I almost feel like I'm ready to go get baptized again. I appreciate that. And if our archivist is taking notes, they can say that I read the page on paragraph on page 100 at our anniversary meeting tonight. Both you and the new man must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances.